Going over IRS Notice CP171. This is a notice that you might receive from the IRS if you have overdue taxes. This is a reminder of how much you owe based on your tax liability, interest, and any applicable penalties. So we'll get into the meat of this notice in just a moment. But before we do, I want to point your attention to a couple of things at the top of the notice. So in the upper right-hand corner, you can see the notice number, CP171. You can see the applicable tax period, which in this case is December 31st, 2016. The notice date is probably the most important piece of information here because everything else when it comes to due dates and things of that nature all tie back to the notice date. So sometimes you'll see a notice that says, please take this action within so many days of the notice. Other times you'll see a specific date on the notice, but please know that all of those timelines are based on guidance when it comes to the notice date. For example, many times you'll see a notice that says, please pay this amount within 21 days of the notice date. Or they'll assign a date that happens to be 21 days from the notice date, as is the case here, where the due date is January 29th, 2018 in this, and the notice date is January 8th. So keep that in mind because the clock doesn't start ticking when you receive the notice. It starts ticking based on the notice date that's here in the upper right-hand corner. And that's particularly important because over here on the left-hand side is your address. It should be your taxpayer name and current address. But if you've recently relocated and your mail takes an extra week to catch up to you, the IRS doesn't care about that. So you would be best served by keeping your address up to date in the IRS records. Individual taxpayers can do that by filing IRS Form 8822. Business owners or non-individual taxpayers such as estates and trusts, I take that back. Estates and trusts can use IRS Form 8822, but business owners would use IRS Form 8822-B, which is the change of business form for a business location, a change of address form for a business. So be sure that you use the correct form to update your address as needed. You can also call the IRS and change your address over the phone if you want to sit through the phone tree and do that. But usually the change of address will take somewhere between 4 to 6 weeks for the IRS to process. So now that we've got kind of those couple of admin points out of the way, let's take a closer look into this notice. So this taxpayer, ABCXYZ Trust, has an amount of overdue taxes for $45,383.69. That looks like that was from a quarterly employment tax return. The original tax liability was $28,722.42. This amount is interest. That seems like a lot of interest to accumulate over the course of a year, but that's what it is in this example. And then there's a failure to pay penalty. So we'll talk about what you can do to mitigate some of these penalties and the associated interest in just a moment. Let's take a look at what this notice is saying you should do right away. So if you're working with a representative from the IRS to address the outstanding taxes, then you don't need to do anything if you were advised that the collections process has been suspended because of a financial hardship. If you're still not able to make those payments, then you don't need to do anything. Here's a payment voucher. So if you do want to make a payment, you should. This is the way you could do it with a check or a money order. You would make that check or money order payable to the United States Treasury. You should write, in this case, your employer ID number, the tax period, and then the form number on that payment, as well as any correspondence. There's an IRS address here. I would default to using that as opposed to this address up here. Even though this is the same IRS location, it looks like there's a slightly different address marking here. So I would use this just to be on the safe side. Sometimes the address on the payment voucher is a completely different IRS location from the one in the letterhead. So I always try to caution people to use the address as listed in the payment voucher whenever possible. So if you're not working with an IRS representative, then you should pay the amount due by the due date. And then the rest of this talks about setting up different ways of payment. So the IRS will take a wide variety of instant payment methods. So credit card, debit card, EFT withdrawal. You can use the Treasury Department's electronic federal tax payment system. You can go to the IRS website. You can even find ways to give a third party cash where they would then make a payment to the IRS on your behalf. So there's lots of ways that the IRS will accept money. But if you have the problem that a lot of taxpayers have, you might not be able to pay the entire balance right away. So you can also look into installment agreements, regular deductions from your bank account, periodic payment plans, all of those things. So if you can go to irs.gov/payments. You can request an installment agreement where you pay a certain amount, a preset amount per month for a certain period of time until your debt is paid off. So we'll put a link in the show notes on resources for the tax form that you could use to get that started. So for balances under $25,000, you could do everything pretty much straight through the IRS website if you wanted to. You can also call the 800 number if you don't agree with the amount due. You would review your account. If you do this, you should probably make sure you have your tax records in hand with any information that would refute the facts that are stated in this notice. So if you don't do anything, the IRS will continue to apply interest and additional penalties. So you will also receive annual reminders until either the statute of limitations for collection is expired. Do understand that the IRS will do everything to make sure that you pay your debt before that statute of limitations has expired. So that means placing liens on property that you own, seizing property and selling it to generate revenue to pay off your tax debt. Those are all options that are available to the IRS. So take that as seriously as it sounds. Here's an explanation of the failure to pay penalty. So you can read more about how they calculate the failure to pay penalty on the outstanding balance. And then you can request a removal or reduction of penalty. You can, for a couple of reasons, you would file IRS Form 843. You can request reasonable cause if you meet the IRS's reasonable cause criteria. Generally, there would be circumstances like a serious illness or injury in the family. If you lost your financial records because of a natural disaster, there are certain categories that would constitute reasonable cause. The IRS also has a program known as first-time abatement. So there are a wide variety of tax penalties that the IRS has discretion over under the first-time abate policy. And then finally, if you specifically requested writing on a tax issue, or if you requested in writing guidance or advice from the IRS on a tax issue, and then you received written guidance and you relied on that for your tax return, and then the IRS turns around and penalizes you, you can request a removal of those penalties. All of those by completing IRS Form 843, claim for refund, and a request for abatement. So interest charges are here. basically a breakdown of the various interest rates as they might apply to whatever period of time your tax bill was outstanding. If you can't really request directly an abatement of interest the way you can with penalties. However, if you are able to get your taxes or your penalties reduced, the IRS will recalculate your applicable interest based on the new amount. So you at least would get the break on the interest that was calculated on the new either tax bill or the penalties that were applied. There's some additional guidance down here below. We're going to select this link right here to a page on the IRS website, see if there's anything else. Basically, it's kind of a primer about how much you owe, and then a couple of frequently asked questions. We generally understand the gist of those questions, how to set up a payment plan. Do you receive penalties if you don't pay the full amount of tax? Does the IRS charge interest, so on and so forth. But this is a decent link because it also has links to other things you may want to know. So if you want to request an installment agreement, there's a link to the IRS form to do that. If you want to know more about the collections process, you can take a look at IRS publication 594, so on and so forth. So I think this wraps it up for the CP171 tax notice. As I mentioned, we'll put links in the show notes to resources we've created about some of the tax forms mentioned here. So if you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. If you like our YouTube videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, or if there's another topic that you'd like to see in an upcoming video, please hit us up in the comments section. Thank you very much and have a great day.